Hello, hello, kia ora. Welcome back to Empathetic Educators EEConQuest. I am so excited to be in session 12. Can you believe it? Oh my goodness, we are 10 hours into the EEConQuest marathon. And yeah, really excited for this conversation for session 12. So let's get ourselves started. Hello, hello. Like I said, we're back on session 12 and I'm so excited to be here. And some people are actually, Dr. Harvez just said kia ora, and he has been here from the whole session as well, which is fantastic. And yes, I just want to give a little overview of people who maybe are catching up or this is the first session that they're joining in with. So we have a full, like I say, 12-hour day of learning happening, and you can find out more about that at bit.ly/EEConQuest 2021, where all the previous sessions, the past 11 sessions are going to be, and where this session will be stored as well. And so if you catch up, you can find out more about that, and all the resources that we're talking about as well will also be on those pages. We also have a resource guide that goes along with it, so some fun quests, some missions and things to make things interactive, and sharing those with the community of learning too. So bit.ly/EEConQuest guide. And so as part of our sessions as well, as part of our conference, it's completely free sessions, but we want to try and raise money for Youthline New Zealand, and it's got some fantastic causes there. I was a Youthline counsellor trying to make a difference for the youth of today in New Zealand, making those things about mental health as a provocation. So bit.ly/EE-Youthline, anything you can give will be absolutely fantastic. Or if you can't give anything, that's no problem. Sharing it into your community so that we can raise money in that space too would be fabulous. So without further ado, let's get our guests on the screen. Kia ora! Really, really happy to have you on the show today, and thank you so much for welcoming it on your Friday evening, coming on to have a conversation about work, about education. So yeah, thank you so much. I just quickly put my flame up here and let you know about a little bit about me. So fueling my passions is empathy and perspectives and collaboration and joining together. So would you like to share what ignites your passion, what fuels your mission, for what you're doing at the minute too? So maybe we'll start with Rosalie. What fuels you?
Well, I do have my picture. I've got it on the slide if I can share it.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. If you just press share screen at the bottom, and then we can put your screen on the board.
Sure. So thanks for the opportunity. And while I guess I'm getting that ready, happy Matariki to everybody.
Matariki, is it?
Yeah.
Oh, happy Matariki.
Yeah, today is the first. I just want to show this picture.
Yeah.
Is our Matariki in Aotearoa is our Māori New Year. So it's just want to be inclusive of everybody who sees the stars. We all are underneath the stars, and happy Matariki to everybody. So my flame, and I will find it right here. So I started in the middle, and so I'm quite driven by social justice, and I love place-based education. I love Indigenous knowledge, in particular Māori knowledge, but any Indigenous knowledge is beautiful. Language, culture, identity, and I love people, and I love children, and I love the relationships. So that's in the middle part. Around the edge of my flame, I've got authenticity, honesty, aroha, so love and empathy, people, and enduring thoughts and meaning, and changing hearts and minds of people.
That is so beautiful. That's so decorative. Oh my gosh, that's so pretty.
I had fun with my granddaughter's paints.
I'm loving the children involvement in this. A couple of people have had their children draw some things. They have their colours and that kind of thing going on. So yeah, Keisha says stunning, and Ken says wow. So yeah, beautiful artwork.
Thank you. So I'll do I just move this out? Oh no,
yeah, it's okay. I can just remove it. It's fine. Beautiful. Thank you. So like, I think I'm really resonates with all those different things. Empathy, obviously, as well, is a big part of my fuel. So yeah, really good connections there too, and really excited to have your perspectives in the conversation as well. So yeah, Derek, what fuels your flame?
Well, ngā nui kia koutou from Wellington or Lower Hutt in New Zealand, te awa Kairangi. I've failed miserably to create a drawing of my flame. I'm afraid I had a very full-on day today, which I had hoped to find some minutes. But the answer for, I guess, is an interesting one. I was thinking about what is it that fuels my flame right at this minute, and it's a little different to yours, but it's actually my grandchildren. And what they personify and they represent to me. The thing that fires me up is actually the concept of future-focused education, the idea that actually we're in for the long haul, and we live in a world where so much of what we do is very short-term thinking. We're thinking about the next election cycle, the next financial year, the next thing that's going to satisfy our fashion need. We're not thinking further out. And many cultures around the world have inherited that idea of, or have embedded in their culture, the notion of 7-generational thinking, taking time to think about the decisions we make now and what will that be doing to impact not just my kids, my grandkids, but 7 generations out. So my grandkids are the personification of all that fires me up, and that's with lots of aroha, that's a lot of embrace, that's a lot of affection and their future. Kia.
Beautiful, thank you so much. Yeah, it's such a nice connection to it all, and that's why I love about the work that you are doing with that Future Makers, which we'll put the link in as well. Is like when we connected before last 2 weeks ago about potentially putting this together, is like that future focus and where that passion comes from. So yeah, thank you so much for coming and sharing your lights, coming and sharing your flames. So so question 1 that we're going to be connecting to, and I think that really connects to like what your passions as well, is what is one area of the New Zealand curriculum? And just before I meant, just the reason why I'm so passionate about this is because New Zealand curriculum for me, and New Zealand, is like the way that they're trying to approach it. I know that there's not everything going well, and like there's different things that can be improved, but for me it just has so many great things that we should need to share across the world and to try and get this space moving forward too. So yeah, what's one area within New Zealand curriculum or the community of learning across New Zealand that aims to create holistic experiences for the teachers, for the learners, and things like that? So yeah, Derek, what do you think?
Kia ora, Naomi. I thought hard about how I'd answer this, and I think I can't get past the fact that at the heart of the New Zealand curriculum is a focus on competencies. And to me, that's the thing I keep coming back to, because the idea of a competency is that integration of knowledge, skills, attitudes that we require to successfully engage in a task, whether it's learning. And I think the more that I've spent time, not just in New Zealand schools, but in Australia and America and the UK, where there is a sort of transition to this sort of thinking happening, and observing in classrooms, I can't help but feel that we are still shaking off a lot of the embrace of education that I experienced when I was young, and that was way back last century. And so where we still think about curriculum as being a description of the knowledge that we need to transfer from someone to elsewhere, or we think of it in terms of specific skills, and skills become just routinely defined and we get them, whereas a competency or a capability is a much more holistic virtue in itself. And it makes so much more sense. Someone sent me a meme the other day that had me laughing, and it said, I'm so grateful that I learned about quadratic equations in maths class and not how to do my tax return, because quadratic equations become so useful during that season. And I thought, it kind of, we get so hung up on these key areas of knowledge. And I'm not dissing that, areas of knowledge are important foundations. We all know that in disciplines. But in the end, when we live our lives, we live them as whole people, not just our heads, but our hearts as well. And so the emphasis on a competency-based approach is what opens the door. And we've been very, very lucky in New Zealand to have that door open to us, to be able to explore more holistic approaches to education, that attend to the academic as well as the well-being kind of sides of our nature, that allow us with freedom to look at thematic and integrated and cross-curricular areas of study, that allow us to engage with our communities as a resource to learn about where we've come from as much as where we're going to. So I think for me, that those competencies are the liberating door opener for those who wish to embrace them in the way that they're intended.
I think I love like the idea, that's exactly why I wanted to talk more about the New Zealand curriculums, because that's exactly what I feel towards going from a British curriculum and learning about things in England and then come to New Zealand and seeing that because we talked about like SEM, talk about well-being in the conversations in England, but it wasn't part of the curriculum where you're trying to actually understand it as part of something that you're bringing to, because if you don't have it there, then you might just not really go looking at it. And I think what we had is like whenever I was teaching there was sometimes you can't forget about it as well, even though it's there, you still have to look and you still have to like actually bring it into the conversation. But I love the weaving part of what New Zealand looks at as well, is like that weaving as part of the curriculum, as part of the, I always get it wrong in the early years, the te whaniki, or te whaniki, yeah. And then the New Zealand curriculum where they both start with the mat. And like the weaving part of it, and that's such a beautiful part of like the history of New Zealand and like the culture of like the Maori culture, bringing it in, because the weaving represents the whānau coming together and like all the different history bring.
And don't forget Marautanga or Aotearoa. That's our other key curriculum. Same concept in here. Yeah, exactly. So like it's like both of those coming together. That weaving part is just so beautiful. So yeah, I think thank you for sharing that. I think I'm going to put that link in because it changed my whole practice. Even the curriculum part of it is just so beautiful. So yeah, Rosalie, what's your connection to this, or your kind of like area that you think?
So yes to key competencies, Derek. I am with key competencies, I'd like to move it and morph it into localizing the curriculum. So in the last couple of years, New Zealand has got a really big push on localizing the curriculum. So, and just because I'm pictorial, I've got pictures so you can see what I'm talking about. To just give the holistic view.
Beautiful.
If that's okay.
No, perfect. That's I'm the same. I'm very, very visual in what we're talking about. So that's beautiful.
So Derek referred to 2 curriculum documents. So we've got the New Zealand curriculum and then there's a Māori medium one. So they're both different, and there's lots of discrepancies. So even though people might think we've got a bicultural approach to education, they're still very different. However, localizing the curriculum has given an opportunity for all schools to reach out to the communities and the people of those communities and ask them what are their aspirations for their children. And there's the weave the voice of students, the voice of parents, the voice of their whānau, of their families, and the wider community. So all the community, the whole community, and their aspirations for the children that are in the area. So it is key competencies, but it's roped in, I think, to the bigger vision of what is it that you want your children to leave with by the time they leave your school, and some. So it's, if you see down the bottom of this picture, it's got a pathway of a pathway in school. So it's how do we support children's transitions from early years to school, to intermediate, to high school, whereas we know that lots of Māori children, so I speak for marginalised communities, don't usually make it to the end of their pathways at school. And so that's why there's been a huge focus to look at pathways for students for jobs in their communities. And the difference with this picture here is that it's encompassing of a Māori worldview with the marae in the middle, and Māori aspects. So there's aspects of spirituality, which is heavy in Māori culture, that's interwoven into the creating of local curriculum.
That's beautiful. I think like with the localizing, there was a question saying like, is it national level, province level, city level? Like because obviously you're working with the core community and trying to like understand that. Is that more of a national kind of thing that we're trying to aim for? Yeah.
What do you mean, a national?
Because I think the question was like, where does the localizing occur? Like national, province, city? Like, is it like we're like that's the overview of the whole space of like what we're trying to get? Like the big picture goal is that it's actually just there. It's the weaving part again goes into like the weaving of both the all coming together and understand it together. Yeah.
I do have a couple of other pictures just to explain what localizing curriculum, what potentially what it is and isn't. But another big thing in regards to localizing the curriculum, and it's coming out next year, is New Zealand is going to be teaching New Zealand's histories, which is a first. Even though you might can at high school take history, there's actually New Zealand is lying underneath a veil of ignorance of what has actually gone on in our country in the early settler days, and colonisation, and so to have Aotearoa New Zealand histories taught in schools is humongous, and supports the cultural narratives and stories of people that lived in areas before schools and settlers came to New Zealand. So it's huge. And the biggest, I've got another picture. So here's just my cultural connections story. So where I went to school growing up in Masterton, I currently live in Auckland, but I grew up in Masterton, which is close to Wellington, where Derek is. I never knew, so I was raised in mainstream, but I never knew that just not even 500 metres up the road from my school was this pa of my ancestors. And all the students at school are connected to these significant sites and places and people and a language and a culture, hence the social justice and language and culture. But it's huge for students' identity and well-being and mental health. So that's your kaupapa of identity. So, which is so huge, why local curriculum to me is so important, and to get that collective vision from the community in whānau. But what I just wanted to, on the language that you see, the Māori language that you see on the side, was a letter written by my ancestor here, the one there with the tefa tefa. But he's telling the government to leave the land alone and to go away. But what I'm saying is that as a little child that went to school, never knew, we did not have the Māori language in our family for, like Derek's saying, 7 generations, for 3 generations. So it's about re-indigenizing the curriculum, and localizing the curriculum is what it's about. And I just wanted to share the last school that I taught in here in South Auckland, where the data and stats of South Auckland students, Samoa and Pacifica, is it's really bad. Like, the stats are really bad. But in terms of localizing the curriculum, it's about linking to the place in which school sits. But in this place here, you can see these old pictures. Once were mountains, and now this day and age are quarried and they're taken over by industries, and jails put inside, and just in the same space of where Indigenous peoples once lived, now has prisons where the Indigenous children and their families go to these prisons. So I'm really big on the, key competencies, but big on the localizing curriculum, because if we don't teach the local curriculum with cultural narratives, then we're missing another perspective of a story of place for people.
It's so beautiful, and that's what Keish said about like they're doing a similar thing about localized curriculum in Hawaii, and I think like that's like it's such an important conversation to be having for like the belonging piece. So like empathy, that's why I'm really happy that both of us are coming on here today, because there's different people like coming on, and all three of us talking about this curriculum. And I think that perspective piece is just so important for the empathy part, is like, how can we understand the people who what are they coming with, and like belonging piece, like it's crazy that that identity part for you, like that's your immediate history, and that wasn't part of your identity as well growing up. So yeah, it's such an important part. And these conversations, like as we're even preparing for this, I was like, this is such a great conversation for us to have in this community, in this circle as well, because the more we can have these open conversations and trying to move forward, is to see like where do they both come together, and like how the weaving. That's what I love about the New Zealand part of the curriculum, is the weaving part of what they're trying to do. And even like that's why I feel really connected, because like myself and my partner are going back, because it's such a holistic, they're trying, like, I know not everything's right and not everything's good, but like that's why the question wasn't just about the curriculum, but the community of New Zealand is like, there's so many, like the community of that's why I really connected with was like the spiritual end. So like you say with the Matariki, like those like 4 pillars of what we end up being, like that holistic view of a person is such an important part of the whole curriculum as that, but also just as being human beings, like you say, the pathway of moving from early years the whole way through their lives to go forward in it. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing that space as well too.
I think, if I can add, I think the link, as Rosie said, between competencies and curriculum, I think there's a third leg to the stool that goes with it, is that the important thing, and the link between key competencies or competency approach to curriculum and the way that you would embrace that, is that it would be very easy in some contexts to read and see local curriculum, and particularly local histories, as you just learn about. And that's back to that transfer of knowledge thing. But you've heard in Rosalie's explanation of that, to do that properly, you need to take a competency-based approach. It needs to be based in empathy. It needs to be rich with critical thinking capability. It needs to be rich in the understanding of the communication that is taking place and enables that to happen. So it's about the capacity we have to learn in, with, and about the context of our local history. And I think the third part that's really important to me, that our curriculum enables us to do, when you start going down this path and combining that, is that it has an intense focus on the personalization of the learning through that. It's not just a hatch batch and send you out the other end. You can't learn secondhand through the experience of someone else this stuff. You have to be in the experience yourself. And so the need to ensure that we are thinking about each individual, and so that takes us into the area of inclusive education and understanding the differences that make us the people that we are, is kind of embraced in that. So for me, those 3 things hang in the balance about getting it right, and that we don't turn into simply thinking about knowledge transfer and all of this, you know, and B, that we have a future focus. And because, as Rosalie said, when you start discovering things, particularly for someone like Rosalie, who has a strong cultural connection with what's there, and then for someone like me who has not that in my background and has just inherited some of those things, there's a whole lot of things that surprise us, that cause us to feel pain, that confront us. And unless we have the capabilities, unless we are equipped emotionally and so forth to deal with that, then the learning doesn't really occur. It just passes us by. And so that to me is what the important thing is, and why I think we do have such a liberating curriculum. And now we have, you know, a real focus on the histories and localized curriculum. We've finally got to the point where place and context are given the priority and all that we need.
Yeah, I think, like, go ahead.
Not sure if you wanted to add on to the holistic view, but if you wanted to, I do have another picture, and it is of Matariki. Hey, the flax itself.
Beautiful.
So here's the harakeke, the flax, and it's this urukuhia rāranga here is, and I'm just going sideways from the conversation of localizing curriculum, but sticking with the holistic kōrero. Just that Rukia Raranga here is a position paper for assessment. So quite often we assess children with, what they can't do with pen and paper with a test or so. But this position paper gives Māori medium teachers the ability to, if you look at this harakeke picture, to take the whole of the child into consideration when you're assessing. And I think it's something that's really different to everybody in the world. So the child is in the middle there with their parents on the outside of the flags and then their grandparents. And what the idea is that it gives teachers or Māori medium teachers the gift of intuition when you're assessing children, which is giving a real holistic view when you're assessing. So just as an example, so you can make sense of it, if you are assessing a child for their oral language ability and they don't do very well, but you see them on the weekend in a school production or something like that, and they're amazing, there's a bit of a contrast. So Rukuhia Raranga here allows that my ability to capture that and the child and bring those things together and give them a really rich report. Just want to add that. So that also comes into the localizing of curriculum.
That's so beautiful. I think like those visuals, that's what I love. I love about like the different parts of the curriculum is like those visuals that go along with it are just so, you can just understand it and you can feel it. Like I feel the curriculum that we're trying to like go towards in New Zealand. I know we've got a lot of steps to go for, and I'm so excited to go back to New Zealand to keep continuing that conversation because like it's just, it's exciting.
Yeah. So you're welcome to stop the screen share. Just wanted to
I think
show
I'll add these links because I think people are in different, like you said, like it's Indigenous. You're excited about the Maori part, like, but like the Indigenous conversations that are going across in different parts, like Keisha said about it over in Hawaii, and like it's such a useful conversation to be having, so that we can keep supporting each other in the different spaces to like continue learning with each other. And I think that's what it is, like open to learning and trying. Empathy for me is that it's like open to the person in front of you and understand the person in front of you to be able to go forward together as well. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing those different places. I think it kind of does link into like the next question that we are going to talk about is like that question too of New Zealand are having important conversations trying to make educational systems more inclusive and especially through a bicultural lens. So is there any strategy you think will help this conversation? We've kind of talked about what the content or what the behind the scenes are. So moving forward for the strategies, is there any strategy you think will help these conversations move forward? So Rosalie, yeah, would you like to start that conversation?
Yeah, so again, I'll go back to the plug of Aotearoa New Zealand Histories. I will get the picture up. It's really huge. Like Derek was saying, there's lots of conversation. Well, he didn't say conversations to be had, but there are conversations to be had between people. And as you do learn and discover, your identity and events that have taken place on the land in which the school is, or where you live, and realise there was a battle there and, settlers invaded, or the Crown invaded a particular, community. In fact, they did it across New Zealand. I think this is where the critical conversations of like this objective says is about thinking critically about past and interpreting those stories, and being able to have those conversations and to realise that, or have your assumptions tested is big. And that comes through place-based education. I really am a really big believer in it.
Yeah.
For people who don't know about place-based education, because I think Keisha mentioned it as well, what does that what does that entail, place-based education?
Yeah, so just in a nutshell, place-based education is you start where your feet are. So I'm living here in Auckland at the moment, and when we moved here, we just start making connections to people, to place. I do have a slide to show. I think it's this one here. When I work with schools and we start to get into localizing the curriculum with a more Indigenous space or Indigenous thinking, it's about the people who have lived at that place before. People were there. So if you were to even close your eyes where you are now, there, and there were no buildings and no schools, and we're going back a few hundred years, what was there? There were people there before we have ever been. So it's acknowledging a voice. And you're welcome. If you did close your eyes, you can open them. It's acknowledging tangata. In New Zealand, we call them tangata whenua, so people of the land. It's acknowledging tangata whenua and acknowledging that they have a voice, that they lived here. And so like with this activity, what a significant part. So where did Māori live? And they all lived by rivers because they needed water sources. So what are Māori place names? So all Māori place names have history. They don't just randomly give a name. Everything has a story. So it comes down to the narratives. What are sacred sites, mountains, rivers, significant people who have made significant changes in the place. So your tupuna. So place-based education are acknowledging all these types of things in the place in which your school is currently at.
Beautiful. I love that. And that's the perspective piece as well. It's like what Derek said at the very, very start is like, it's not what we're happening right now goes way beyond us in the past, and what's happening in the future, our actions are way beyond us in the future. And it's like, that really does acknowledge. And that's what I love about the Māori, like the perspective of there's so much more before us and there's so much more after us, and being like, the Tanga, guardians of the, I'm sorry if I pronounced it wrong. Yeah, like guardianship is just so beautiful because like you're guardians of like the world, and I think it's such a great analogy too. So yeah, thank you for sharing of it.
One of the examples, a really practical example, just to illustrate what Rosalie is talking about, which I think I've seen from my non-Māori perspective make a massive difference, has been with just over the last few years, building of new schools. And I'm thinking particularly of experience I had in Christchurch, where a number of new schools were built after the earthquake and in places where new populations were flourishing. And the Ministry of Education has been working very closely with the local tangata whenua, the tribal regional group, the iwi groups. And they've become very involved. Where there's a piece of land that they're considering putting the school on, they've had the history of that land, the reflection on who's been there before, and what all the stuff that Rosalie was just talking about. And that is kind of gifted to the new school community to become part of what they think about in terms of the school. So when the school is built, it is built with the intention of somehow capturing that story in the architecture of what is built, which includes maybe the layout of the buildings to represent things, the color patterns that are used, the naming of blocks and classrooms. There's a whole lot of ways it's manifest, but it means that the young people and their families who start going to that school at least have that point of connection, because it begins the inquiry. Why is this here? What's that there? And realizing, this was here before that. And I think that's the privilege that new schools have, with it. But there's no reason why those same stories can't be explored and told wherever we are. And I guess that's just reinforcing what Rosalie said. And I never, with the school that you used to teach at here in Stonefield, I had the privilege of listening to Rosalie and her partner lead a discussion about the history of that. And from a Western perspective, it's an old quarry, but it's a spectacularly important place to the previous generations, which was once a sacred hill, a place that had huge significance and meaning, and not just there, but actually it has links to the agriculture, the growing of food, which was distributed around. And so suddenly you get a whole perspective from that one place of what was there before that changes the way that you think about where you are and who was there before.
And I think it goes that's why I loved hearing, because Stonefields is trying to learn about the history, and we have a lot more going on in the actual curriculum with us at the school as well. And I think that's what it's so much bigger. Like that's why, as I say, I'm like obviously learning more about the Maori culture and being more interested in it. But it has my perspective on the world, as in like the world's so much bigger than just what we think it is too. Like I think that's what I love about the Maori is like it like connects all different parts of the world and like the land and the rivers, and like it's such a beautiful way of seeing it. Like my perspective will never be the same like after moving to New Zealand, because I see the world. Even whenever I was here my first week, I experienced an earthquake in Japan. Oh my gosh, scared the life out of me. But I was like, that's connecting to the land and being like, there's so much more a part of us in the world than just what we sometimes see. And like I love that, like that what you walk through the cultural audit of like what, even I closed my eyes there now, I was like, oh my gosh, I pictured that earthquake almost, because I was like, whenever all is said and done, when these are all going away, we have the land that was here and the people who were here before. So yeah, it's such a beautiful space to try and understand, even as a person who's trying to understand it. And it must be even more of that, people who are actually walking through it too, from like their heritage. So yeah, thank you.
Cool.
Yeah, so I think like other people have like the people who are teaching in Hawaii have definitely are contributing to it as well, and saying like about like University of Hawaii is now has ethno-mathematics degree in mathematical learning in local application instead of only in theory. And I think that's what moving these conversations forward and learning from each other and trying to like understand what's going on is gonna how we actually do. So yeah, the same as me, I'm excited to go back to New Zealand, and Dr. Harvest, he said I'm excited to return to New Zealand too, and with the curriculum as well. So yeah, really great takeaways, and thank you so much for coming and sharing. And we'll put some of those resources that you have talked about below the session so that people can go and explore that if that's what they're trying to do in their curriculum as well. So thank you so much. And I'm actually really excited to get back, because Rosalie, you'll be in Auckland, so I might just have to buy you a coffee for thanking you for coming on. And when you're up, Derek, in Auckland, I'll buy you a coffee too, which would be lovely.
That'll be lovely. Look forward to
it.
Yeah, because I'm so excited to get back there and just keep learning from everyone at the space as well. So just let people know, like I said, the links are going to be on the website that we've talked about, so bit.ly/EEConQuest 2021, and letting people know all about that too. So if you have enjoyed the conversation and you would like to support, like we talked about mental health of the youth line, bit.ly/EE Youth Line. We really appreciate that support in that space too. And if you'd like talking about this stuff, and subscribe and let us know, give us a little like or let us know about that too. That'd be really good. Our next session, and oh my gosh, I can't even believe it, it's our final session of the day before the finale quiz. Whoa, we've had 11 hours of learning, and yeah, going. So I just love this conversation. So you can join us for our next conversation at bit.ly/EEConQuest 13. We're going to be talking all about YouTube and 21st century teaching as well. So like I said, I'm so appreciative of you being on, and yeah, we'll be finding out more about that from the core education and future makers. So yeah, just let us know where people can find you or what you're sharing in those spaces. So Derek, you have a website you like to share, or what you're working on too? So
yeah, it's just futuremakers.nz is the website there.
Beautiful, and we can see what's going on. And Rosalie, any sharing you would like to share with what you're doing?
Oh, no, I do a million things, but at the moment I'm into Aotearoa New Zealand histories, and I'm creating digital technology activities to integrate learning.
Beautiful. So we'll put those links in, but what you sharing those things too to try and widen the knowledge of those things going on. So thank you so much for coming on Empathetic Educators EEConQuest, and thank you to the team. I'm just going to take a photograph of our session so that I can have that as our thing too. So 3, 2, 1. Beautiful. And so thank you so much, and I look forward to catching up for those coffees in Auckland and across New Zealand as well.
Thanks so much, Naomi.
Thank you so much. Bye, team.
Kia ora.